Once upon a time in Kasala Quarters, there lived a wicked teen landlord, so thin you would think the wind would blow him away. But his wickedness was heavy like a mountain. He went about tormenting his tenants, fainting at excuses, rolling on the ground, and even collecting fines for mosquito bites. But my people, what happens when tenants get tired of fear and unite with one voice? Grab your seat because today's story will make you laugh, make you think, and teach you a lesson about power, wickedness, and unity. In the heart of Ajegunle, Lagos State, stood a compound that was nicknamed Kasala Quarters. The compound had 10 rooms arranged in a square, with a shared bathroom, kitchen, and a central space where children played and tenants quarreled daily. It was busy, noisy, full of drama, and yet somehow it was home to the hardworking families that lived there. But what made Kasalakwata truly popular was not even the tenants, it was the landlord. His name was Mr. Ukadike, but everyone secretly called him the walking stick because he was so thin that he looked like an actual walking stick. His chest was as flat as a chalkboard, his neck as long as a broom handle, and his legs looked like two dry sticks of sugarcane. Whenever he wore his oversized trouser, tied tightly with a rope, he resembled a grasshopper standing upright. The only part of him that looked big was his head, and when he turned sideways, he practically disappeared, except for his loud voice that could wake the dead. Every morning, before the tenants could even stretch properly in their beds, the wicked teen landlord would begin his compound patrol. He would wear his faded singlet that was once white, but had now turned to the color of pap water, tuck it into his trousers, and walk around like a soldier inspecting recruits. Clear the compound! Clear the compound! He would shout. Am I running a motor park here? On this particular morning, his first victim was Madame Ifoma, a plump food seller who sold beans and pap in front of the compound, and the sweet aroma of beans had already filled the air. Madame Ifoma, he shouted, his voice slicing through the compound like a cutlass. Yes, landlord, she answered, her wrapper tied tightly as she stirred her pot. What is this smell of beans I'm perceiving? Do you want to chase my spirits away with this odor? Ah, landlord, odor, she exclaimed, frowning. Landlord, I'm not cooking odor. It is beans so. Sweet beans that my customers love. But Okadike wagged his bony finger at her and said, from today, no more beans in this compound. If you must cook, cook rice. Rice does not smell like this. The compound children who were already standing nearby with hungry eyes burst into giggles. One even whispered, maybe beans smell is too heavy for his thin body. You know he's very thin. They bursted into laughter. The landlord marched on, inspecting the lines where clothes flapped in the morning breeze. He stopped suddenly in front of Mrs. Chukwudi, the tailor's wife, who had hung freshly washed baby clothes. Madam Chukwudi, he shouted, making her drop the bucket she was carrying. Yes, sir, she replied nervously. Why are you hanging clothes where my shadow is meant to pass? Are you trying to block my shadow from breathing fresh air? The poor woman blinked in confusion. Sir, but it is ordinary baby clothes. Ordinary baby clothes? Do you know that your wrapper nearly slapped me in the face as I was walking? Next time, if you block my shadow again, I will seize these clothes and donate them to orphans. At this point, the tenants that were already hiding behind doors bursted into laughter. One even whispered, since when the shadow need fresh air? The next stop was a group of children playing 10-10 in the compound yard. The landlord's face twisted like unripe mango. Children, scatter! I say scatter now, he shouted. Do you want to break the ground with your jumping? But landlord, we are only playing, little Ngozi said innocently. Playing? In my compound? This is not a playground. If you want to play, go to National Stadium. The children groaned in disappointment and dragged their feet back to their rooms, muttering under their breaths. One boy whispered loud enough for the adults to hear. If landlord was fat, maybe he would like play, but he's thin like stick, so he hates happiness. By midday, the whole compound was buzzing with complaints. Every tenant had a story to tell. Madam Ifoma was upset about her beans ban. Mrs. Chukwudi was still frowning about her seized drying space. The children sulked about their cancelled playtime, and the day wasn't even over yet. Everyone knew that before the landlord went to bed, he would surely find 10 more reasons to frustrate them. Why is this man like this? Musa the Hausa mechanic tenant muttered. It is because he's so thin inside and outside, Chukwudi the tailor replied. Now small wind go carry am one day, another tenant joked, and the compound bursted into laughter. But even in their laughter, they knew the truth. Living under the broomstick landlord was a daily battle. One wise old tenant, Mamozioma, shook her head and said, my children, you see, wickedness is like fire. When you play with it, it will burn your own hands. This landlord think he's tormenting us, but one day he will meet his match. Everyone nodded in agreement because even though Mr. Ukadike's wickedness seemed endless, the tenants believed that the universe had a way of teaching people bitter lessons. And indeed, they were right. The landlord continued his madness, but a day was coming when he would learn that even the tiniest stick can be broken if it bends too far. If there was one place in Kasala quarters that could spark argument faster than kerosene catching fire, it was the shared bathroom. The bathroom stood like a crooked little box at the far end of the compound, built with old zinc sheets, patched together with nails and ropes. When it rained, water leaked from the roof, and when the sun shone, the zinc became so hot that tenant joked it could fry eggs. But despite all its problems, the bathroom was the pride of the tenants. They all contributed money to build it, and everyone managed it in peace until the landlord decided to make it his battlefield. One Saturday morning, while tenants queued with buckets for their turn to bathe, the landlord stormed towards the bathroom like a general going to war. "Attention everyone," he barked, his thin neck shaking with authority. The tenants froze, buckets in hand. "What is happening here? Why is water pouring outside the bathroom? Who gave you people permission to waste water on my land?" Landlord, it is just small water from bathing now," Madam Informer said gently. "Small water? Did you just say small water?" he repeated dramatically, holding his head as if it was about to explode. "Don't you know that water can destroy foundation? Today it is small water. Tomorrow my compound will sink like Titanic." The tenants exchanged confused glances, and one even whispered, "If water can sink house, why rain never carry this holy gods go?" That day, the wicked teen landlord announced his new bathroom constitution. From today henceforth, no tenant should spend more than 5 minutes in the bathroom. Anybody who sings while bathing will be fined because singing wastes energy and water. Tenants must carry their own small broom to sweep the bathroom after use, or else he or she will pay cleaning charges. No bathing after 8 p.m. because he claimed water spirits visited at night and would attract bad luck. The tenants gasped. 5 minutes? Even children cannot bathe in 5 minutes, Musa protested. Ukadike raised his bony hands. "Silence! My rules stand. If you want to bathe for 1 hour, go and build your own bathroom." The next day, Madam Ifoma entered the bathroom to wash her children. She had just finished soaping the second child when this landlord began banging on the zinc wall. "Time up! Time up! Madam Ifoma, you have crossed 5 minutes." "Landlord, wait oh, I still dey rinse my pikin." "No excuse, come out now before I pour cold water on you." The tenants gathered outside laughing as Madam Ifoma shouted back. Finally, she stormed out with half-soapy children grumbling, "If his steam body enter this bathroom, I go lock him outside." A few days later, Chukwudi went to bathe. He enjoyed singing in the bathroom as he scrubbed his body. Suddenly, the zinc door flew open and the landlord appeared with a notebook in his hand. "I caught you. You will pay fine of 500 naira for singing in the bathroom." Chukwudi, still holding his sponge, blinked in shock. "Landlord, but na my voice now. I no use microphone. I no even use MP. Voice is voice. Do you know your singing disturbed my meditation? My ancestors were about to reveal secrets to me, and your yeye voice chased them away." The compound roared with laughter. I think Chukwudi's wife had to hold her wrapper tightly so it wouldn't fall from her because she was laughing hard. Things reached boiling point one Sunday morning. Tenants lined up with buckets, preparing for church. Everyone was in a hurry, but the landlord stood there like a traffic warden and a stopwatch in his hand. "Next, your time starts now," he shouted as each tenant entered. Baba Musa the mechanic came out fuming. "Landlord, this is madness. I only washed half of my body before you started shouting time up. Am I a chicken to be bathing half? Another tenant added, "See as my child dey go church with soap still inside his ear." The compound erupted in complaints. Children cried, women shouted, and the men argued. But the landlord only puffed out his thin chest and declared, "This is my bathroom. My rules must be obeyed." That evening, the children of the compound decided that they had enough. They formed a secret meeting behind the kitchen and planned their revenge. The next morning, as the landlord went for his usual inspection, he entered the bathroom first to check for water leakage. What he did not know was that the children had carefully smeared red palm oil all over the floor. The moment he stepped in, his bony legs slipped and he fell with a thunderous crash that shook the zinc walls. "Jesus, oh, my bones, my spinal cord," he screamed, struggling like a cockroach flipped on its back. The tenants rushed over only to find him sprawled on the floor, his long legs in the air like a broken stick. "Landlord, sorry oh," the tenant said, trying not to laugh. but the children hid behind the corner, giggling uncontrollably. That day, the wicked tin landlord limped around shouting that enemies were after him, but the tenants knew the truth. His wicked bathroom rules had finally backfired. Later that night, Mama Uzoma shook her head and said, "You see, this is how wickedness works. When you oppress people, even children will rise against you. That bathroom belongs to all of us, not just landlord. His bones are thin. If he continues like this, one day his wickedness will break him completely." The tenants nodded in agreement, their laughter echoing through the night. But deep down, they also knew the landlord would not stop here. His wickedness was just beginning. In Lagos, everyone knew one truth. NEPA light is like a thief. It disappears when you need it the most. At Kasala quarters, nights without electricity were normal. Once NEPA took light, the whole compound would sink into darkness. Mosquitoes would begin their midnight choir, and tenants would find themselves with anything they could find: plastic plates, newspaper, or even slippers. To survive, tenants invested in small generators, popularly known as "I better pass my neighbor." The sound of 10 little generators rattling together at night was like a noisy orchestra, but it kept the tenants happy. At least they could have fans, charge their phones, and even watch evening football. But of course, the wicked tin landlord Mr. Ukadike hated anything that brought his tenants joy. One hot evening, just as the compound lit up with the humming of generators, Ukadike stormed out of his room, holding his bony head dramatically. "Stop it! Stop it at once!" he shouted. "This noise is killing me. Ah, my eardrums. Ah, I am dying. I am collapsing." The tenants looked at him in surprise. "Landlord, it's just small generator now," Musa the mechanic said. "Without this generator, my children will melt in this heat." "Heat?" Okadike cried, his voice trembling like a preacher in revival. "When I was a child, I used to sleep inside kitchen where firewood smoke filled my nose. Did I die? No. That is why I'm a very strong person today." The tenant exchanged looks and almost burst into laughter. Did he just say strong? This man looked like a broom that had missed too many meals. The next morning, the landlord pasted a big sheet of paper on the compound wall. Written in bold letters were the words: "Notice to all tenants. Generators are banned in this compound. Anybody caught using generator will pay 5,000 naira fine and risk eviction. Signed, management." The tenants gathered around the notice, their mouths wide open. "Management, wah!" Madam Ifoma scoffed. "Which management? Is it not only him and his bone skin body that is here? 5,000 naira. Ha! If I have time 5,000 naira, would I be living in this compound?" Another tenant said, shaking his head. But the landlord stood proudly nearby, his thin chest puffed out. "Yes, I am the management. This is my compound. If you want generator, go and rent house in Banana Island." That night, the heat was unbearable. The tenants obeyed reluctantly, afraid of his threats. Sweat poured down their body. Children cried, and mosquitoes held a concert. Inside one room, Musa's wife fanned their baby with a wrapper until her hands grew tired. In another room, Madam Chukwudi's children cried, shouting, "Mommy, on Jane now." But she could only hug them, whispering, "Landlord will throw us out if we try it though." Meanwhile, in his own room, the landlord sat happily with a rechargeable lamp, sipping garri and groundnuts. His thin body did not mind the heat. After all, there wasn't much flesh on his body to sweat. But the tenants were not ready to suffer forever. A few nights later, Musa quietly wheeled out his small generator, covering it with an old carton to reduce the noise. Soon, Madam Ifoma joined, and then Mr. Chukwudi. The sound was low, but it was there. Slowly, one by one, tenants began defying the ban. Unfortunately, the landlord's ears were sharper than a rat's. The moment he heard the humming, he jumped from his bed. "Aha! So you people want to kill me with noise?" he shouted, rushing out like a mad rooster. He ran straight to Musa's generator, kicked the carton off and screamed, "I caught you red-handed. Oh yeah, 5,000 naira. That is your fine." "Landlord, abeg now," Musa pleaded. "My pikin get fever. He needs fan." "Fan? Fan? Fan is luxury oh. In my days, we use hand fan made from palm leaves. That is how resilience is built." "Resilience call resistance ni," Musa muttered under his breath, but he paid the fine to avoid trouble. From that night, the landlord made it his mission to be the generator police. Every evening, he would walk around with a whistle, patrolling the compound. Beep, 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 beep. He would blow the whistle. Switch it off now before I seize it." The tenants nicknamed him Generator Soldier. Children even began mocking him with songs. "Landlord sing like broom, blowing whistle vroom vroom. He no like gent sound though, but his own lamp dey shine round." The tenants laughed, but the landlord grew angrier each day. One Saturday night, Nigeria was playing a football match. The entire compound was eager to watch, so the tenants secretly agreed to contribute fuel for a bigger generator that could power all their rooms and one shared TV in the courtyard. The atmosphere was electric. Men shouted at the screen, children danced, women served groundnuts and drinks. For once, Kasala compound felt like a real family. But just as Nigeria scored their first goal, who stormed into the compound? The wicked tin landlord, his bony chest heaving, eyes bulging out. "What is this abomination?" he shrieked. "Generator again? In my compound? And football noise too? Ah!" The tenants ignored him, cheering loudly. "Goal! Nigeria! Goal!" Enraged, Ukadike marched straight to the generator. With his thin arms, he tried to pull out the fuel tank, but alas, his broomstick body was no match for the heavy machine. Instead, he slipped, fell backward, and landed in a big basin of soapy water that Madam Informer had kept for washing plates. The compound erupted in an uncontrollable laughter. Even the children rolled on the floor, pointing at him as he struggled like a drowned chicken. "See, landlord, he has turned into fish," somebody shouted. The landlord, dripping wet, screamed, "All of you are devils, devils! You want to kill me before my time." But nobody cared. Nigeria scored again, and the compound rolled in celebration, drowning his own voice. Later that night, as the laughter settled, Mama Ozioma spoke once again. "You see, when you deny people their small comfort, they will resist you. A landlord should not be an enemy to tenants. Wickedness is like shadow. It follows you everywhere, and one day it will fall on top of your head." The tenants nodded. They knew the landlord had not yet learned his full lesson, but the crack in his authority was beginning to show. If there was one day every tenant at Kasala Quarters dreaded more than mosquito season, it was rent day. The wicked tin landlord, Mr. Ukadike, never forgot that day. Even if lightning struck his memory, rent day was written in his bones. As early as 5 a.m., he would wake up, wear his ceremonial landlord uniform, a faded agbada that hung on his broomstick body like cotton on a pole, and grab his big brown notebook that contained all his tenants' names. He would then march into the compound like a tax collector in ancient times. "Today, we shall separate the sheep from the goats," he would declare. "Those who are faithful will pay their rent. Those who are goats, God will expose them today." On this particular rent day, the tenants were already restless. Some had the money ready, others were still hustling to complete it. A few had spent their money on emergency family issues and prayed the landlord would understand. But understanding was not in Mr. Kadike's dictionary. He entered the courtyard, dragging his feet dramatically, holding the notebook to his chest as if it was a Bible. "Compound people," he cried, "come out now. Today is the day of reckoning." One by one, the tenants came out, some carrying envelope, others carrying empty faces. Children gathered too, whispering, "Today, landlord will start another drama." The first tenant to be called was Madam Ifoma, the bean seller. "Tenant number one, Madam Ifoma," the landlord shouted, flipping his notebook. She quickly stepped forward with an envelope. "Here, landlord, full rent, even extra 500 naira for your recharge card." The landlord's eyes lit up like a torchlight. He opened the envelope and counted the notes one by one. He licked his lip dry and nodded. "Good woman, faithful tenant, may beans never spoil in your pot." The compound chuckled as Madam Ifoma walked back proudly. Next was Chukwudi, the tailor. "Tenant number two, Chukwudi." Chukwudi scratched his head and stepped forward slowly. Landlord, you see?" "Stop there," the landlord snapped. "Any sentence that starts with 'you see' simply means you don't have my money." The tenants laughed. "No, no, landlord," Chukwudi protested. "I have part of it here. Oh. The remaining small one, I will balance it next week. Business has been slow." Before he could finish, the landlord threw himself to the ground dramatically. "God, oh, hell! My tenants want to kill me with hypertension. Somebody call ambulance. This is how landlord died before their time." The tenants gasped, then burst into laughter as he rolled on the sandy ground, his agbada gathering dust. "Landlord, stand up now. It is only small balance," Chukwudi begged. "Small balance? Small balance is how cancer starts. First, it is small. Before you know, it spread. Pay me everything or I will die here today." Children clapped and cheered as if they were watching a play. Then came Ngozi, a young single mother who sold akara by the roadside. She walked forward nervously. "Tenant number three, Ngozi, where is my money?" "Landlord, please. My mother is sick in the village. I used the money for her hospital bill. I will pay you after 2 weeks, please." The compound went quiet. Everyone felt pity. But the landlord folded his arms. his bony shoulders shaking with fake sorrow. So your mother's sickness is more important than my landlord's ship, abi? When my own mother died, did I stop collecting rent? No. I used my tears to mix cement and build this compound. Pay me my money, Jare. Ngozi bursted into tears. The other tenants murmured angrily, but the landlord stood firm like a stick in the ground. Musa the mechanic also explained that customers had not paid him, and the landlord shouted, "Enough! All of you want to kill me." Then suddenly, he dropped his notebook, staggered like a drunk goat, and collapsed on the floor, lying motionless. Yay! Yay! Landlord has fainted though, children screamed. Women rushed with buckets of water. They poured one full bucket on him. He jumped up immediately, sputtering and shivering. Who poured water on me? Do you want to drown me? The compound roared with laughter. Even Musa, who was worried a moment ago, held his stomach laughing. Ah, landlord, you did not faint. You only wanted to dodge rent excuse. Me? Dodge? The landlord shouted. I was communing with my ancestors. You people interrupted it with water. The drama became too much. Madam Ifoma finally stood up and said, Landlord, enough of this nonsense. We are your tenants, we are not your slave. If we have the money, we will pay. If we don't, you should give us time. All this rolling on the ground and fake fainting, it is childish. The other tenants clapped. Yes, Musa added. Instead of fainting like a goat, why don't you try to understand us? Chukwudi shook his head. Even Nollywood actors don't act as much as you do, landlord. The whole compound laughed again, but this time, the laughter had power. The tenants were no longer afraid. That night, Mamozioma gave her wisdom once again. My children, a landlord who rules with fear is like a yam farmer who eats his seed yams. At first, he enjoys, but later, he will have nothing left to plant. Ukadike thinks tenants are his enemies, but one day, he will realize that he cannot live without them. The tenants nodded. Slowly, they were beginning to realize something important. If they united, the landlord's wickedness could not break them. And though Ukadike still strutted around with his notebook, somewhere deep inside, he felt the shift too. For the first time, the tenant had dared to challenge him. The compound was unusually quiet that morning after the landlord's rent day fainting show. Normally, the place buzzed with the sound of children playing, women gossiping, and Musa hammering on old car engines in front of his room. But on this day, the tenant seemed thoughtful. Everyone was tired of the landlord's wahala. It was Madam Ifoma the bean seller who first voiced what everyone was thinking. My people, she whispered to a small group of tenants gathered around under the mango tree. If we keep allowing this landlord to intimidate us, one day he will ask us to pay rent even for the air we breathe. The others chuckled, but they nodded in agreement. Chukwudi the tailor added, that man is too thin, but his wickedness is overweight. We need to teach him a lesson he will never forget. Ngozi, still emotional from her embarrassment the day before, she sniffed and said, yes, he insulted me in front of everybody because I used my rent money to treat my sick mother. I won't forgive him until he learns how to have mercy. Mercy? Musa scoffed. That landlord doesn't know the meaning of that word though. If dictionary was looking for the word wickedness, it would carry his picture. The tenant burst into laughter, but Madam Ifoma raised her hand to quiet them. So what do? We can't keep suffering like this. At that moment, Mamozoma walked in with a calabash of herbs. The tenant immediately shifted, giving her space. The old woman was known as the unofficial chairlady of the compound, though the landlord had never approved it. She looked at them with her sharp eyes and said, my children, I know what you are planning, and I tell you, it is not wrong. The tortoise may be slow, but when it carries wisdom, even the leopard cannot catch it. If this landlord does not want to change, then it is time we use wisdom to humble him. The tenant leaned closer and eager. But Mama, Ngozi asked, what kind of wisdom can bring down a landlord who believes he is the god? Mama Uzoma smiled slyly. A teen man who thinks he's a giant can be defeated, not with fists, but with laughter and unity. If you people act together, he will break like dry stick. That night, after the landlord had gone to bed, the tenants gathered secretly in Musa's workshop. The only light came from a small lantern, and the air smelled of engine oil and roasted groundnuts. Each tenant sat on a makeshift stools. Their faces serious. Even the children were warned to keep silent. Okay, Musa began, clearing his throat. We need a plan. Something that will shake this landlord to his bones, but not get us thrown out of this compound. Chukwudi grinned. I have one idea. What if we all start speaking in riddles whenever he asks for his rent? Let him be confused till his head spins. The room erupted in laughter. Mami Foma shook her head. No, Chukwudi. Confusion is not enough. That man needs something stronger. Ngozi raised her hand timidly. Um, what if, what if we all refuse to greet him for 1 week? No good morning, landlord. No respect. Just silence. What if we do that? Ah, that is small, Musa said. It's true that that man feeds on respect the way mosquito feeds on blood, but silence alone cannot be enough. They all looked at Mama Zioma. The old woman placed her calabash on the floor and spoke slowly. My children, you must understand, wickedness grows when people are afraid. If you want to break this landlord, remove his power. Show him he cannot survive without tenants. Everyone nodded. So how do we remove his power? Chukwudi asked eagerly. Mama Uzoma leaned forward. By unity. If he harasses one of you, all of you must rise. If he calls for rent, all of you must answer with one voice. If he tries to disgrace anyone, all of you must disgrace him back with laughter. The tenants loved the idea. They called it Operation Laughter. The plan was simple. If the landlord shouted, they would all laugh. If he rolled on the ground, they would clap as if he was performing in a circus. If he insulted one person, the whole compound would reply in chorus. And whenever he fainted, instead of pouring him water, they would start fanning him and singing funeral song until he jumped up. Chukwudi fell off his stool laughing at the thought. Imagine landlord fainting and we start singing, landlord don't die yo, landlord don't die yo. He will jump up like a frog. The tenant laughed so hard the lantern almost went out. Finally, Musa raised his right hand. Let us swear that no matter what happens, nobody will betray this plan. If landlord attacks one person, we will all respond. Agreed? Agreed. The tenants chorused. They placed their hands together in the center of the circle. Even the children joined, giggling. From today, Madam Ifoma declared, we are no longer ordinary tenants. We are one family, and together we will humble that wicked tin landlord. The room echoed with cheers, laughter, and claps, and for the first time in years, the tenants felt powerful again. What do you think will happen next? Do you think Ukadike will survive the tenants' plans for him? Watch out for part 2 as I bring you more drama.